When the Outdoors first released, it received a fair bit of backlash for its difficulty. While I do believe this was in part an effect of Doors players being too used to already knowing how to avoid every entity, that when they encountered completely new ones they were thrown off guard, it is also a valid complaint that the Outdoors can be a tad bit unforgiving in certain places. In this video, I will be giving some of my ideas for changes that could be made to make the Outdoors subfloor slightly more balanced and fair. No, not all of these changes are intended to make the Outdoors objectively easier, but to make it flow better and make deaths feel more fair. At the end of a specific entity's chapter, I will list all the changes made to an entity, as well as any counteractive features I may suggest to balance the entity out, if it was made a little too easy. Let me make this clear, this is not just me complaining about the difficulty of the Outdoors. I can consistently beat the subfloor perfectly fine and rarely, if at all, struggle with it. Despite that, it is still important to recognize when one or several features may be a little too difficult for the game, even if you yourself do not struggle with them. Just because you no longer struggle with the subfloor does not mean it is not a little unforgiving in certain areas. You can check the video description for chapters if you want to skip to the part where I talk about a certain entity. But without further ado, let's begin.
Rats, we're rats, we're the rats. We pray at night, we stalk at night, we're the rats.
The Caws are a bit of an interesting one as they don't really serve much, if any, gameplay use in relation to just themselves. So for the sake of this video, every change made to the Caws will be mentioned alongside whichever entity their new change is related to.
Sam! Get off my lawn!
The Groundskeeper, the main guy you'll be avoiding in the Outdoors. Now, one of the biggest criticisms of the Groundskeeper when the Outdoors launched was the fact that he was an insta-kill, and the fact that all you had to do to aggro him was to step onto the grass. And now, I can already hear it. The obvious rebuttal to the Groundskeeper being too punishing is, well, just don't step on the grass. To which, I have to say, you are right. If you just don't step on the grass, the severity of the punishment doesn't really matter as long as you just follow the rules. The Groundskeeper is designed to punish greedy or ignorant players. You get too greedy and try to go for that chest, the Groundskeeper might kill you, and that's entirely on you. However, I'd like to rebuttal that rebuttal by saying, that's not really an argument. Just because the conditions for aggravating the Groundskeeper hide behind an easy to follow yet easy to break rule, does not justify an overly punishing game mechanic. Regardless of how well a player knows that they're breaking the one rule the Groundskeeper set out, their death will always still feel a little unfair and frankly a little petty. I am not refuting the claim that you can simply just not walk on the grass. That's absolutely true. What I'm saying is that that is a weak design philosophy and does not invite productive discussions. Here is the biggest change I would make to the Groundskeeper. Instead of instantly killing players if they stay on the grass for too long, the Groundskeeper now operates on a 3-strike system. Keep in mind that a strike would be given every time a player would have otherwise been killed by the Groundskeeper. Strike 1. The Groundskeeper yells at you before running to you and removing you from the grass, dealing little or potentially 0 damage. Strike 2. The Groundskeeper yells at you again before removing you from the grass once more, this time much more forcefully, dealing moderate damage. Strike 3. The Groundskeeper has had enough, and if he sees you on the grass again, he functions how he does in-game currently, and kills you. If the Groundskeeper catches a player while they're trapped in a snare while on the grass, they will force them back onto the path without adding another strike. If this still feels a bit too punishing, the Groundskeeper could instead operate on 4 strikes, each subsequent strikes dealing more and more damage, before the 4th and final one leads to an instant kill. These strikes could reset every time the Groundskeeper despawns after the Eyestalk chase, or even not at all. Of course, these changes don't have to be exact to what I suggest, and can be subject to change drastically if need be. The main reason I believe it would be better for the Groundskeeper to function this way is because not only does it feel a tad bit more balanced than it currently does, it also gives more use to the health feature. Nearly every entity in the Outdoors is an insta-kill or deals large amounts of damage very quickly. The Groundskeeper dealing damage without the insta-kill not only adds more use to the health feature, which is already incredibly obsolete in the Outdoors, but also still poses a threat to players on low health, meaning even an unaggravated Groundskeeper could still mean death if you're not careful. This is already partially seen in the Groundskeeper's current death animation, where his scythe deals a large amount of damage to players before killing them anyway. Another thing about the Groundskeeper is that he likes to stand around a lot and not actually do his job. Besides going inside of sheds and briefly cutting grass, the Groundskeeper doesn't actually seem to do much around the outdoors. I believe this could be changed to offer more windows for players to step onto the grass while the Groundskeeper is distracted, as currently, the only surefire way to know you're safe is when he's in a tool shed. This is something we actually see within the trailer for the outdoors. In the trailer, we see the Groundskeeper inspecting soil, painting and installing signs, killing weeds, and planting bugleweed, none of which he actually does in-game. Adding these interactions into the game would not only make the Groundskeeper feel more like he actually takes care of the outdoors, but would also offer more opportunities for players to break his rules. Currently, the only thing the Groundskeeper does to actually tend to the outdoors is briefly crouch down and cut a blade of grass, which lasts for less than 2 seconds. This offers barely any time to actually step onto the grass. But if the Groundskeeper took more time to do other things around the outdoors, it would give players more time on the grass while not feeling like he's a total pushover. Another interaction the Groundskeeper could have is him stepping on a snare. As we know, snares are all around the outdoors, yet the Groundskeeper is seemingly immune to them. I suggest that the Groundskeeper should be able to be caught by said snares, which would occupy him for longer than usual. He could then take time to kill the snare by stabbing it with his scythe, as we see in the outdoors trailer. The dead snare would then pose zero threat to players or the Groundskeeper. I do have a couple more interactions for the Groundskeeper, but I will save those for the specific entities those interactions require. But with that, I believe that's everything for the Groundskeeper. Solution: the Groundskeeper no longer insta-kills and instead operates off of a 3-strike system, dealing more and more damage each time a player is caught before killing them. The Groundskeeper is now also occupied more often with various tasks that distract him for longer. And finally, the Groundskeeper has a unique interaction with Snare, being able to kill them if he happens to step on one.
Oh, I am no longer the boss of myself. However, I can teach you to grow your own one in a few short steps.
Mandrakes are another one of the entities that were quite controversial due to how punishing they were and how quickly they can kill you. And I don't know about you, but I was extremely confused when I first encountered a Mandrake, and it felt pretty punishing to be killed within just 10 seconds of this weird plant screaming at me. I feel like it's a pretty reasonable assumption for someone to think that the way to avoid them is to just run away from it. And I feel like that should be added as an alternative way to deal with Mandrakes. Instead of replanting a Mandrake, grabbing it and walking far enough away from a Mandrake's initial spawn point while holding it will now rip it out of the ground and kill it. This also means that Mandrakes cannot detach from their vines and roll around, meaning they will be stuck in place and players will be able to safely run away from them. In folklore, Mandrakes would be pulled from the ground using dogs to safely harvest them, so it would make sense that upon a Mandrake being uprooted, it would die. Currently, the Groundskeeper and Mandrakes already have a unique interaction, where if a Mandrake is rolling towards you, or if you're holding one, it will pluck the Mandrake from your hands and kill it for you. I believe this interaction could be expanded a little bit further, with the Groundskeeper now bagging up a Mandrake and taking it to a toolshed to be disposed of. This would be another way to distract the Groundskeeper and allow players to step on the grass. The fact that Mandrakes also drain your oxygen levels instead of health also makes health a bit obsolete in this floor. So I believe having Mandrakes exponentially drain your health would give bandages, aloe, and the Herb of Viridis more use within the outdoors. Not only does the vision narrowing make it harder to see where you need to replant the Mandrake at, but pairing this with the incredibly harsh shadows and darkness of the outdoors can make it incredibly hard to see, especially when holding a Mandrake and you can't use a light. I'd also personally up the time to kill for Mandrakes from 10 to 15 or even 20 seconds. Solution: Mandrakes can now be pulled from the ground instead of replanted. This also means they will not roll around on the ground to follow players. The Groundskeeper now also bags and disposes of dead Mandrakes. And finally, Mandrakes also now drain health instead of oxygen, and kill players at a slightly slower rate.
Electricity!
Surge is the entity I believe is one of the more balanced, if not the most balanced entity within the outdoors, as their telegraphs are simple to understand and give enough time to get to shelter quickly. I really only have minor nitpicks for Surge, and while that may seem disappointing, That really just shows that Surge is a very fairly and well-designed entity. Originally, the Groundskeeper was planned to run and hide from Surge, and the animation for this is still in the game's files. Frankly, I have no idea why they removed this, as not only is it cool and adds to immersion, but it can also serve a gameplay purpose. I suggest that when Surge is attacking or about to attack, the Groundskeeper will stop whatever he's doing, ignore any players currently stepping on the grass, and hightail it to the nearest tool shed to hide, where he will then stay for a small amount of time after the attack is over. This ensures players are safe to take shortcuts to hiding spots, gives more downtime to step on the grass, and adds to immersion a bit. This next suggestion again has to do with the problem of health in the outdoors. Currently, Surge can kill you in about 2 ticks of damage, which, don't get me wrong, is totally fine, but I believe doesn't make much sense. Normally, lightning is not 1 or 2 large surges of electricity, but several smaller, incredibly fast surges that make up the larger lightning bolt. I believe this should be adapted to Surge's attack to more match its electricity-themed gimmick. To counteract the slightly slower time to kill, Surge could instead now attack slightly faster, meaning players will have to react quicker. Don't get me wrong, the damage will still be extremely quick, but will be slightly slower than usual to accommodate for the reduced time to react. This next nitpick more so has to do with the outdoors itself, but the general lack of rain has always bothered me. It is absolutely pouring in the back door, hotel, and the mines, but rain is almost non-existent in the outdoors. So I suggest that rain begins to pick up as Surge is preparing to attack, and when it starts attacking, it begins absolutely storming. I'm talking hurricane levels of rain. The rain would then wear off after Surge leaves. I feel like this would add to the danger and power of Surge, since it's supposed to feel like a powerful lightning storm thing, whatever it is. Another small nitpick I have with Surge is its telegraphs. While I previously stated its telegraphs are clear and easy to understand, they only briefly appear as brief flashes of green lightning. While these work perfectly fine, I think there is still room for improvement. On top of the regular greenish-yellowish flashes of lightning, the sky and clouds now slowly turn yellowish as Surge approaches, similar to what happens during real lightning storms. Like I said, these are small nitpicks for the entity, as I believe it already works great, and are really just for more immersion and realism. Solution: Surge now causes the Groundskeeper to take shelter during its attack. Surge's attacks deal less damage, but now deal damage much quicker, with less time to react. Surge now also causes rain to begin falling and the sky to change color upon its arrival. Let's also make it so Surge causes Caws to panic and fly away when it spawns, cause why not?
You do not know what is it like to be over 600 pounds. The earth always shakes and trembles when I walk around. No, I can't eat without my gravy. Even without it, I will just go crazy. I do not know what to do with my gravy. That, spell it back to me.
Okay. I don't even know where to begin with this one. First off, let me say that I do actually like the concept of monuments. On paper. In practice, however, they often heavily disrupt gameplay and make exploring generally less fun, due to you having to watch your back all the time. The first and easiest suggestion I would make is to not only increase the volume of monument footsteps, but also changing them to be more fleshy and less clicky sounding, if you know what I mean. The current sounds can blend in with the environment and make it hard to hear, even when they're right behind you. Whereas a wetter, fleshy sound not only makes more sense for the monument's appearance, but also stands out among the rest of the sounds of the outdoors. Monuments are also insanely fast. Albeit they only start moving super quickly when players aren't looking at them for long enough, their speed is still ridiculous. Simply slowing them down seems like a no-brainer. We know that the Groundskeeper is not too big a fan of monuments, as we've seen a monument being cooked at the mill. Now, while I do believe that having the Groundskeeper attempt to fight a monument might be a little much, having the Groundskeeper warn you of monuments by pointing or yelling at you would be another cool entity interaction that adds to the immersion, as well as helping you if you're unaware of the monument. Another interaction I believe monuments could have is with the Caws. In the original teaser for the Caws, they were stated to have the potential to be bad omens, and that is the role I feel Caws should play in the outdoors, as both warnings for entities as well as red herrings and ambience. Caws will now perch on top of and around the monuments littered around the outdoors, and will not fly away if players approach them while on top of one. If a monument suddenly comes to life, the Caws will fly away and play a unique sound, letting attentive players know a monument has spawned. Keep in mind, I don't mean Caws will only perch on top of living monuments, as that would give away the fact a living monument is near almost immediately. Caws will perch near all monuments, real or fake, and only fly away when one starts walking. And now, here comes possibly the most controversial change of this video. Or maybe not, I don't know. As is, the kill animation for monuments is currently incredibly slow, and I believe that another instant kill entity for one that's as easy to die to as Monument is, once again, is a little bit too punishing. So here's my solution. If you have more than 66 or 50 health, I haven't really decided yet, the Monument will begin a quick time event, that if you succeed, your character will fight off the Monument, saving you from death and causing the Monument to flee. The QuickTime event could either be a button mash QuickTime event, like Resident Evil, or one where you need to press subsequent buttons in quick succession, like in Telltale games. The QTE could either drain your health the entire time it's occurring, or simply kill you if you do not do it quick enough. If you are on low health, your player will be too weak to fight off the Monument and will die. This QTE allows for players with quick enough reaction times to rectify their mistake, while still punishing players for being caught. I really want to know what you all think of this change in the comments, so please let me know. Solution. Monuments now have a more distinct fleshy walk sound and move significantly slower. The Groundskeeper now has a chance to warn players of any potential monuments following behind them. Caws will now perch on top of and around monuments, and will play a unique sound cue if one happens to get up. And finally, monuments now enter players into a quick time event upon catching them, causing the monument to flee if players manage to pass the QTE.
I think I know. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. What is it? I think I know.
Well,
it's wood.
Not helping you now.
Why?
Really, the only problems with Eyestalk's chase don't even stem from Eyestalk itself. Rather, from the one other entity that is included in this chase, as well as the environment around it. Knowing the correct path for the Eyestalk chase is incredibly easy, due to the fact that there are barely any background props behind the dead ends of the chase, making it extremely obvious even through the darkness that there is nothing in that direction. Simply adding more foliage and stuff around the playable area would make the correct path much less obvious and require even the tiniest bit of effort to find. The second change I would make to Eyestalk's chase has to do with snare. Currently, being caught by a snare stuns you for about as long as it would normally, which after happening only 1 or 2 times can result in a death. I think simply having players remove their foot from the snare a lot faster would help keep the flow of the chase better, and make snares feel less like an instant death. To counteract this, snares will now spawn in much larger abundance, and in areas of the chase other than parts with brick floors. Solution. The correct path is much less obvious and features more background objects throughout the chase. Snares also stun players for a shorter amount of time, in exchange for them spawning more often throughout the chase.
Hitting birch trees, popping red flowers, it's like Mother Nature's pixelated garden party. Look, I'm gardening. Sneaking under leaves, it's stealth mode me. Aha, pretty flowers, gonna make a fancy bouquet. Swinging axe, another tree bites the dust. Ah, fresh air and deforestation, my kind of day.
Bramble acting as a subfloor's final boss is something we've never seen before, and something I really hope we see more of, as it really is a cool addition. It's unfortunate that Bramble fumbles being a final boss in almost every possible way. For how cool the spectacle of Bramble and the World Lotus is, it sure as hell is easy. The hedge maze never changes, and Bramble often moves and teleports way too slowly for him to ever pose a threat as soon as you're out of his line of sight. The map of the hedge maze on the wiki even shows the most optimal path to take to cut each vine, and if you follow this path, you can beat the final room in a little over a minute. This final fight could easily be fixed if the hedge maze had multiple predetermined layouts that change each run. If the design of the hedge maze changed each run, it would make it much harder for players to memorize the layout and actually induce the feeling of being lost in the maze. When I first played, I also expected the World Lotus to interact with the players in some way outside of Bramble itself. Whenever you cut a vine, you see them retreat into the World Lotus. Imagine if every time you cut a vine, paths that were previously open are now blocked off, and paths that didn't exist before are now suddenly there. This would create the need for players to find a new way to get to the next trap instead of following the predetermined routes. The main problem with Bramble is just how repetitive it is. In the hotel, the books and electrical sockets are always in new spots, and the codes required to leave are always different. Same thing goes for the nest. The anchors you need to activate are always different, although they do have set spawn locations, and the codes you need to enter are different as well. Bramble just doesn't have anything like this. You can do the traps in any order, and every run is the exact same. Adding just a little bit of variation to this fight could do wonders for it. My final suggestion for Bramble is to make it a little more obvious as to how you're actually supposed to counter him. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first encountered Bramble, I was extremely confused as to how I was supposed to survive him. I believe I just brute forced it and beat the floor with a fraction of health left. Even in retrospect, it really is just not obvious or telegraphed well at all that you're supposed to stay still when his light is on. And you really just have to be lying to yourself if you think that it's actually super obvious, and anyone who didn't know is just an idiot. Bramble's opening cutscene honestly just does a terrible job of explaining anything. If the cutscene actually showed the Groundskeeper purposefully staying still while Bramble's light is on before being dragged away, that would literally act as a perfect tutorial for how to avoid Bramble. Solution: the hedge maze no longer has just one predetermined layout, and the maze now changes with each fine cut. And finally, the opening Bramble cutscene now more properly shows how to actually avoid Bramble. And with that, that is every entity in the outdoors rebalanced or redesigned or whatever I decide to title this video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the changes made in the comments. Okay, bye.